Alright guys, I'm your new teacher for today and tomorrow. I'm Caitlin, if you all remember me. We're going to start off with praying, so can I have a volunteer? I just want to get our focus on right and towards God. Yes, go ahead.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you that we get to go to school today. I pray for Mr. Evans and Mrs. Hopkins as they're going through cancer. And I pray that this class will go well, and I pray, amen.
Thank you. Alright, what did you guys do over Christmas? Let's talk about that first, because I mean, who can forget about Christmas? I have three favorite things. Natalie, what did you do?
Okay,
That's not a word.
I spent some time with my cousin. We went to the mall and the Independence Center.
Yeah, cookie puppy. That's awesome. Kaylee, what was your favorite?
I spent time with family and got a lot of Stranger Things stuff.
That's awesome. Giovanni, what did you do?
I slept through it.
Oh, that sounds fun. Guess what I got to do? I went to Colorado, and I got to go up into the mountains. There was an old stagecoach road. It was about 30 miles long. We got to go up into the mountains, and then there's an old mining community. So that was pretty fun. But what did you learn about with history before Christmas break? Does anybody remember? That was like forever ago. A war, maybe? Remember which war it was? Nobody? You can look. Recall your memory. Chapter 9.
The Civil War?
No, not yet. That's coming up. Let me tell you, we studied the War of 1812. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that affected America afterwards. So today we're going to study about nationalism, American system, and sectionalism are the three main topics for today. Why in the world do we need to talk about these?
We're going to know what rule you're under and how it works.
Yeah, does anybody else have another idea? Well, America started beginning to become its own. It had become its own after Revolutionary War, but it was still really dependent on Europe. So after War of 1812, it started to become America. And people, other nations in the world began noticing America. So first we're going to talk about nationalism. And the War of 1812 significantly impacted America in this aspect because of the nationalism that grew. Wars always do that. Wars always make you defend your country more, and it increases the economy. Everything Americans were thinking about was America during that time. So you come out of War of 1812, and you think about nationalism. There were 7 new states. There was Louisiana, Indiana, Mississippi, Illinois, Alabama, Maine, and Missouri. Now, Missouri wasn't added until 1821, but make a note of that. We're going to study about Missouri tomorrow. So remember that. There was also key leaders. There was John Quincy Adams. There was Daniel Webster. Henry Clay. Remember Henry Clay. We're going to remember that a lot, so make note of that. Do you have any paper to take notes? Okay, thanks. All right, so remember Henry Clay. So I said we had Adams, and then we had Webster, Clay, and then we have Calhoun. 4 people. Can somebody help me out remembering those again? We have Adams, yep.
Henry Clay?
Yes. Calhoun and Webster. Okay, remember those. Okay, so they all promoted a strong and prosperous America, which helped the nationalism in America. First, we're going to talk about Henry Clay and the American system. So there's 3 parts of the American system: the protective tariff, the renewal of the national bank, and the internal improvements. So let me put these up on the board. Can somebody help me out? What was the first one?
Protective tariffs.
Yes. And the second one?
Renewal of the national bank.
Yes. And then the third one. those are the three main sections you're going to need to remember. We will talk about those more in detail now. Does everybody have it all written down on their notes? Okay, so the first one, protective tariffs. Okay, so we have the Embargo Act and we have the War of 1812. Those really helped boost American economy after the War of 1812. You have American manufacturers needing to make a lot of different products for their war, and they can't rely on other nations like England to supply them because they're at war with England. England's not going to supply them with goods when they're at war with them. They began relying on themselves rather than European goods at this time. Well, Europe noticed this, and they started reducing the cost of their goods because they wanted to sell their goods rather than Americans buying American goods. So this created a lot of competition between America and Europe. British can also reduce their costs because their factories had been in an act longer, so then they could make better products and cheaper products. So first we need to notice a tariff is a tax on imported goods. So make a note of that, write that in your text. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. So that's what the Americans started doing. They put a tariff on British goods coming into their country. So they would, any British good that was coming in, they would put a tax on that. So the British had to pay money in order to sell their goods in America. Does that make sense? Okay. Then there is a protective tariff, which is a high tariff designed to shield a nation's manufacturers from foreign competition. That's more specifically what America did as well. So we have the tariff and then we have a protective tariff, protecting our nation's manufacturers. Let's help explain this a little better, so I need everybody to come up here. I need one volunteer to be an English person. Yes, and then I need an American person. Yes. Okay, so English over here, American over here. The rest of you four are going to be behind Jocelyn. You guys are going to be American colonists. Can I have a suggestion of what we sell?
Where do I stand?
Yep, right over here. You're an American colonist. Let's sell coats. So say something in British. You're going to come over here and sell coats to the Americans.
What do I say?
Yeah, say something in British. Anything that you
Use
come
your
over
accent word.
British accent.
Say anything?
Anything. You're coming over to sell coats. So.
I'm going to sell some coats.
All right. Now, you say something in American that you also make coats.
Yeah, we make coats.
Okay, then let's think about this. She has made coats for years and years. Her parents made coats. Her grandparents made coats. She has factories that have been in progress for a long time, so she is talented at this. Now, you've only made coats for a few years, so yeah, you're good at this, but you can't make it as well, and it's cheap. But you want all these people behind you to buy from you. You don't want them to sell. So what are you going to do?
Learn how to make better coats?
No, you want to charge her because she's coming into your country.
Oh, I'm the president?
Yeah, you probably look like Trump.
Okay, so what are you gonna do to make her cost higher for the consumer?
So we're charging her more.
So what is that called?
A tariff.
Yes. Good job.
Tariff. She's like, no, leave.
So what does that do for all you guys?
Makes it cheaper, right?
It doesn't necessarily make it cheaper because she's selling coats for maybe $10. She sells coats for $8, but she comes in and she puts a $3 tariff on her. So that makes it $11. Does that make sense? So that actually, you guys can't buy a coat for $8 now. You guys have to buy a coat for $11 or $10. So you guys will probably buy her coats. Does that make sense? Okay, you guys will probably buy her coats rather than hers, but that also raises the cost because no longer is it $8. It's at least $10 or $11. Does that make sense? Okay, you guys can go sit back down. Good job.
Business.
It is. It's called competition. Okay, so they passed the tariff of 1816, which was Yes, and it was the first protectionist legislation in America. Make note of that. You guys are going to want to know that it was the first protectionist legislation. Okay, so we already talked about that it raised the cost for consumers, but it also increased economic growth within America because Americans were buying American goods instead of British goods. So that encouraged growth, economic growth within America. It also weakened some areas though, like raw material and agriculture and shipping. That weakened the economic in America in those three aspects: raw material, agriculture, and shipping. So this became a divisive issue between the North and the South. You guys are going to remember that. Make a note in your notes. Write that down in your notes that the tariff of 1816 was later to become, it was later to create more conflict between the North and the South. And you know there was a little bit of conflict between the North and South, and it was growing up until the Civil War. So the Civil War wasn't just that time period in the 1860s. It started way back now in 1816 with the tariff of 1816. Okay, so then we talked about the protectionist tariff. We're going to talk about the national bank. Well, the first national bank, do you remember who it was instituted by? I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes, good job. And it expired in 1811. So there was a lot of financial problems within America. The state-chartered and private banks were starting to issue their own money, and that created a lot of instability. Well, inflation soared because of that, and we needed to find a good, stable financial solution in America. So America passed a bill that lengthened the Second National Bank for 20 years. Remember that, 20 years. So it's 1816. When is it going to expire? Yes. Good job. Okay, it has 3 jobs. I want you to write these down. Let me catch up my PowerPoint. Did you guys get all that written down? I know I'm kind of talking without looking. Go ahead and write it down. I'll wait for you guys. So we had the protective tariff and then the tariff of 1816. Whenever you're done, put your pencils down and look up at me. Okay, what is a tax on imported goods? Morgan. Here. Good job. What is a high tariff to protect one nation's manufactured goods? Giovanni. What is a tax that protects our nation's manufactured goods? More specifically, it protects, protective tariff. Good job. Okay, and then what was America's first protective legislation?
Tariff of 1816.
Good job. Are we almost done? Okay, let me move on. Okay, and we already talked about that. It became a divisive issue between the South and New England. All right, so the Second National Bank. The first National Bank's charter expired in 1811. It caused financial problems. The Second Bank of the United States was chartered for 20 years, and this was passed by nationalistic Republicans. And it had 3 main jobs. You're going to write these down in your notes. Okay, first job was uniform currency. So the federal and the state and private charter banks weren't all issuing money. It was uniform currency. Only the federal government was issuing these. The second job was a source of loans to private and public sectors. It created stability in the loans. And 3, it deposited government funds. Does it make sense, Natalie?
I
Okay.
just want to sneeze.
Oh, do you need Kleenex?
No.
Okay. So how many years was it chartered for?
20?
Yes, 20. And when was it chartered? When was the second national bank chartered?
1816.
Yes, so we had the tariff of 1816, and then we had the National Bank of 1816. So we had a lot of these happening at once. Did everybody get it written down? All right, let's move on. Internal improvements. These are construction and maintenance on roads, canals, harbors, and they're paid for by the government funds. So it really popularized the West, first by transportation, and also it brought a lot of information from the West back to the East Coast. So colonists were learning about the West, and they were encouraged by the fact of open land and the freedom out there, so they wanted to go out there, and there's also better transportation to send them out there. Well, one of the main transportation was the National Road. It began in Cumberland, and it eventually reached Illinois. It was started in 1811. There was some controversy though, because the federal government was paying for these, and some people were thinking that it may not be constitutional for the federal government to be paying for other states. So let's think of it this way. So why should New England be paying for a road in Maine? If you guys live in New England, why should you guys support these people who live in Maine for their roads? So that was kind of some controversy, so they thought maybe the states should make their own roads, but it did make a better uniform transportation throughout the United States. So we're gonna study this a little bit more in a different aspect. I have an article about Henry Clay's defense of the American system. So this, I will pass one on to each of you, and we have groups for these. Let's do, Giovanni and Morgan are going to be together, Natalie and Kara, and Kaylee and Jocelyn are going to be together. Okay, so I want two people over here, two people right here, and then two people on that back corner. Okay, and I will pass these out.
Giovanni, you want to switch with Jocelyn? Or whoever's with you. Or you switch with Natalie now, or something like that.
You guys need those names again? I have Giovanni and Morgan, Natalie and Kara, and Kaylee and Jocelyn.
Oh, no, I just said Natalie and Jocelyn.
What? Sorry, that's what I was doing.
No.
Yeah, Kara and you.
I thought she said Natalie.
Did I say it wrong? I know you have. Okay, there's that. And you guys are going to work together as a team, but you want to individually fill out these forms. Now, notice the date on the top. What does it say? Yes, but when were we studying? When was this American system passed? 1816, you're correct. Let's see here. Did you guys get the phone? So this is many years later, and they're just looking back at the American system and seeing if it worked, what areas worked and what areas did not work. Okay, and you guys notice in the second paragraph, it's going to talk about the tariff of 1824. But what did we just talk about? The tariff of? Yes, but tariff of 1824 was basically like a continuation of the tariff of 1816. It just rose the rates of the tariff, and then it put tariffs on other products like glass, lead, iron, and wool. So yes, it's going to talk about a different tariff, but it's still the basic concept of a tariff. So I want you guys to read it and answer those questions. Do detail. Don't just say, oh, America was prospering. Say why it was prospering. I have like 13 things I want highlighted on my paper of how it's prospering. So you guys need to like look at most of those and figure them out. All right, so go ahead. We'll do this for like maybe 10 minutes. So go ahead and read it together and help each other out with the questions. Oh, really fast. I want to also mention, look at the first line and circle the word imperfect sketch. Kara, can you read that whole sentence for me?
I have now to perform the more pleasing task of exhibiting an imperfect sketch of the existing state of the unparalleled prosperity of the country.
Yes, so this is Henry Clay giving the speech in the written document now. And so he's saying that it's an imperfect sketch. Does anybody know why it's an imperfect sketch?
It's not completely accurate.
Why? It's because, does anybody else have another idea? Why is it not a perfect sketch? Why is it not completely accurate? What do you have to have a completely accurate perspective? You have to have people from both sides and from multiple points of view. So this is only Henry Clay speaking. So remember this, you're going to find a lot of truth in this article, but it's not completely perfect because it's only one man's view. It's not lots of people's view. Okay, so go ahead and work on it.
Contentment and happiness. And if we descend into particulars, we have the agreeable contemplation of people out of debt, men rising slowly in value, within a secure and solitary degree, already will not extravagant market for all the surplus productions of our industry, flocks and herds, carousing and gambling, our 10,000 hills and plains, covered with rich and abundant grasses, our cities expanded, and all villages bringing up public by our exports and imports increase and increasing our tonnage. Foreign and coastwise, stolen influence occupied the rivers of our interior and wars by the perpetual thunder and lightning of countless steamboats. The currency sound and abundant. Our public debt of 2 wars nearly repaid, and to crown all, the public treasures overflowed, embarrassing costs, not to return to taxation, but to select the objects which all the greater public establishment. If the term of 7 years are to be selected of the greatest prosperity which the speaking public debt have enjoyed since the establishment of the present Constitution, it would be exactly that period of 7 years which immediately followed the passage of the law of 1895. This transformation of the condition of the country from gloom and distress to brightness and prosperity has been mainly the work of American legislation, fostering American industry, instead of allowing it to be controlled by foreign legislation, cherishing foreign the foes of the American system in 1824, with great boldness and confidence, produced the ruin of the public revenue and the creation of an necessitated condition to resort to strict taxation. The gentleness in South Carolina, General Hamlin, though the tariff of 1824 would offer a reduction of revenue to the large amount of $8 million. Second, the destruction of our navigation. Third, the desolation of American commercial cities. And fourth, the augmentation of the price of objects of consumption. And further decline in the articles of goods. Every prediction which they had made has failed utterly. Instead of the ruin of public revenue, with which they had sought to deter us from the adoption of the American system, we are now threatened with its subversion by the vast inflation of public revenue produced by us.
Maybe not that, but close.
Okay, no, because second is 219.
Why is it not?
First paragraph.
Don't know.
Oh, it's supposed to be.
You're right, the price of
Okay, okay.
Things are happening.
the articles of our
So a lot of jobs
every prediction which they made has failed utterly.
contentment
Every prediction which they made has failed utterly. Instead of a ruin of the public revenue, they then sought to tear us from the adoption of the American system. We are now threatened with its subversion by the vast amount of the public revenue produced by that system. 4 ellipses. What was the question?
That's like a whole thing.
If you like go through, I know she started underlining things, and that's good.
I am.
So like kind of look over it and
39.
see what he's talking about that made America better. Do you think America was prosperous, or do you think it was struggling after? Yes. Yeah. So then go through and like underline and then write it on here because you'll be turning those in. How it was prosperous.
Prosperous, he says they've almost recovered all.
Good job.
Paragraph was to say, like, towards the end, it was just like, yeah, if we were experiencing the best, it would be here during the 7 years. Towards the end.
You guys get it? Any questions?
I think we're good.
How's it coming?
What does
The public debt to horizontal. So it would be if they had
Everything's just gonna fall down.
more debt. Very little.
That looks so good.
You could say they were increasing.
How does Henry Clay describe American farmers are struggling?
Make sure you guys are working together, not just one person doing all the work.
What would it be like?
does Henry Clay say happened to the predictions of the
That's your hat.
what occurs in the American system? So the people who
You can circle it in
didn't
the
want
answer.
the American system,
How was
being
it
how did they
prosperous?
It was went from like gloom and distress to like yeah, and so people who didn't like it,
Oh, I thought you meant like before Christ.
they
1832.
Did you want the sheets, Mr. Bundy? Did you want the 7 sheets?
Yeah,
So I can get
I thought about it, but I didn't want to.
Oh, no, you're good. I can get them.
Are you ready for 2?
Yeah.
What does Henry Clay say? Oh, I just like listed a couple things from here. X. That's concerning.
Okay, I'll give you guys about like 4
their
minutes.
predictions of everything.
Wait, for all these questions?
What does Henry Clay say happened with predictions of those who had close to American system in the beginning? Okay, so we'll work for them for sure.
Like a big paragraph right here in the middle that like said everything that was going on.
Which of the 3 parts of the
Debt was made and like currency sounded like the first.
articles that
Like,
should
the
be
first one was
American.
American system. Great oldest at the so I believe
The currency sounded
it just said
Yeah,
it
we'll do
failed
that.
utterly. Or got that wrong.
I think she was kind of
Okay. Which of the 3 parts of the American system does Henry Clay focus most on his article and believes has helped America?
Yeah, it's really just the whole thing. Because he's just saying
The tariffs?
In every single sentence, everything is
No, those were the,
Okay, if you guys are still on number 1, why don't you move on to the next questions?
like foes of the Constitution or the American system. And those were, yeah, that's what those were.
Okay, so number 4 says the 3 parts. Like,
They're not in here, but they're just from your memory.
oh,
Yeah, sorry, I should write that down. So like, what did we talk about? It was on the board, but I missed it.
Oh,
those 3 things? Those 3 things.
okay.
every prediction which they have made
Which is the
had
first
failed or
failed. Focus most on an article.
Number 4 is just from your memory. It's not off the sheet. It's the 3 things that I had listed up here on the board.
Oh, they're not here.
Or in your notes.
Those are the.
You guys can look at your notes. It's good. Good note taking will help you later on. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes, it did.
Utterly.
Is number 3
Yeah,
tariffs?
I figured out
Or is
what I was
it
writing.
So it's like tariffs. Just tariffs or like protected tariffs?
No,
Either one.
Okay, now I'm curious what your first Oh, you got it.
We'll go and fill out number 4. How about it in just a second? So I'll make sure you guys have those.
Maybe sleep tonight?
If you're done, you can just
Disgusting.
okay.
Already.
Because we're working to be protected.
Here.
So anyway,
There's 3.
well, red. And it doesn't help because I
Yeah.
they're like at the top right there. Oh, bulletins. Oh, thanks. Oh, I think it's these 3. That should check. Okay.
Oh, I have that too.
Me too.
Oh, I can't read that.
All right, go ahead and finish your answers, and then I want you guys to put your names at the top of the worksheet.
Both of those or just?
Just yours, just your own. And then once you're done, put your pencil down and look up here. Okay, what are some interesting things you found? Okay, so was America prosperous or struggling? Okay, how?
pretty much everything.
I want some specifics. How were they prospering?
Weren't they almost out of debt?
They were.
And then the price of land was going up, which was good because it was like increasing value.
That is good. That's interesting that you point that out. Why would land increase?
Because they were like working like on the land and so therefore like becoming better soil and like things like that.
And people began to be more individualized and want to work harder. So they would want to buy land, so land prices would increase. Anything else?
like a lot of, pretty much everyone was employed.
Yes. Anything else? Okay, that's good. I also noticed steamboats in there. He talks about steamboats, and that was some transportation, which would have been under what of the 3 major things? Yes, good job. It also said public treasury was overflowing. What would that be under? Not Morgan. Does anybody else have another idea? Yes, good job. Currency sound and abundant. Does anybody know that one would be under? No, currency is money. Yes, National Bank. And then exports and imports increasing. Yes, good job. Okay, so then question number 2. What does Henry Clay say happened to the predictions of those who had opposed the American system? It was in paragraph number 2. Yes, Morgan?
Their predictions have failed utterly.
Yes. So meaning that the American system, Giovanni, so if the opposing view opposed the American system would have been successful or not successful? Can somebody else help him out? Somebody who's paying attention.
Successful.
Yes. Good job. Okay, question number 3. Which of the 3 parts does Henry Clay tend to focus most on?
Tariffs, protective tariffs.
Yes, good job. And then what were the 3 parts of the American system?
Protective international bank and international improvement.
Internal improvements.
Yeah, that.
Internal. Yes. Good job. Okay, pass those worksheets forward. You guys can keep the articles. I just want the... Thank you. And you guys can return to your own seats. Okay, quickly. Okay, we're going to talk about sectionalism now. Before we do that, let's do one other thing though. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of the national system. So you may want to look back at those articles that you have looked at. What were some of the goods and some of the bads? Let's first think about the tariff. How did the tariff help America?
Make things cheaper in America and things that were coming into America more expensive. So you could buy things from America.
Not necessarily cheaper in America, but it helped boost our economy. It actually raised the cost for the consumer. Remember when we were talking up here, we said it was no longer an $8 coat, it was now at least a $10 coat, remember? Okay, so it actually raised the cost for the consumer, so that was bad. But the good was that it boosted our economy. Anything else? What about internal improvements?
Steamboats.
Yes. What section did it popularize? Yes, it popularized the West, which helped move people to the West. Is there another pro or another con of it?
Pollution.
No.
It's just steam. Water.
Water. How about the transportation?
Oh wait, the what's it called? That road.
What road? Does anybody remember?
The national.
Yes, the national road. That was another pro of it. Okay, what about the bank?
The currency was becoming more like normal and like
Mhm.
it was more
Stabilized.
common to have. Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, I have some written down in my notes. It created division. The tariff of 1816 created division between what sections of the United States? North and South. Good job. Anything else? I think those are the basics. Those are good. Okay, so we're going to talk about sectionalism. While that loads, we'll talk about it. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the sectionalism was caused primarily by the Panic of 1819. Now write this in your notes. There was an economic boom which was right before the panic. What created the panic? Or what created the boom, the economic boom? We talked about the War of 1812. Helped create economic boom, so that there was some boom there. and the Western land sales, and trade and growth of domestic industry. So that's kind of like manufacturing. That all created, that was all right before the panic of 1819. All right, and then what was there's two things that caused the panic of 1819. Pay attention, we're almost done. Write them in your notes, write 1 and 2. The first thing was the collapse of cotton prices in England. The second thing was irresponsibility of banks. So what were the two? And responsibility or irresponsibility? Yes. Good job. Okay, so that's sectionalism. That created some sectionalism, some conflict in America. Nationalism is support of nation. Sectionalism is support for one's own section. So there's two major, very opposite characteristics that we talked about. We're going to do some review. First, we're going to do this crossword puzzle. Do you love crossword puzzles? No, they're awesome. Okay, so you guys can look at your notes if you need, or you put your names at the top. Oh, okay. And see how fast you can fill them out, and then we'll talk about them. If you have questions, let me know.
Maybe more than one word.
It can be more than one word, and there is no spaces in there, if that helps. Here we are. Tariff based on British goods. It was passed in 1860, so we have two keywords, tariff and 1860. Look at your notes.
I don't know if I got it because I couldn't get it out there.
That's okay. We don't show everybody else's tariff. Probably not for the future. Oh yeah, keywords, tariff in 1860. Once you guys are done, you can study your notes. If you guys think you know the information pretty well, you can start on your homework. It's up here. Pages 181 to 184.
Do they do like hyphens?
There's no hyphens. Which one are you struggling on? Let's see. Which question is that? It's the name of this. That was the year it was passed. It had currency, which is money, source of loans, and government funds. Yeah, it's national. It's P-R-O-T-E-I-D-E. We'll give you guys just a couple more minutes. Working on your homework? Okay, let's go ahead and go over the answers. If you don't have it done, it's no big deal because it's not for grading. I want you to fill in the answers though. Question number 1. Giovanni, read that for me.
Tariff of 1816.
Can you read the question too?
Placed a tariff on goods from Britain and ultimately increased the cost of these goods. This was passed in 1816, Americans' first protectionist legislation.
Yes, which was?
Tariff of 1816.
Good job. Kaylee, can you do number 5?
Founder of the American system was Henry Clay.
Yes. We started a little bit late, so we'll keep you just a couple more minutes. Okay. Number 6, Morgan.
Unusually high tariff prevents shield the nation's manufacturers from foreign competition. And it's protective tariff.
Yes. Number 7, Kara.
This was caused by collapse of cotton prices in England and irresponsibility of banks and the Panic of 1890.
Yes. Number 8, Jocelyn.
The intent of extending the life of this for 20 years was to create uniform currency, create a source of loans, and deposit federal government funds.
Number 9, Natalie. Patriotism. You remember? Nationalism. Okay, I'll give you the next ones. Number 2 is internal improvements. Number 3 is tariff. Number 4 is sectionalism. I can get you those. If you don't have to fill them out, I'll tell you after class. So we're going to start off with a review next class period about this class period. So make sure you study those. Make sure you study those answers on your word searches and your notes. Okay, thank you. We'll see you guys later. Did you get all of them? That was second national anthem.
It's just like it catches up.
That just needs to sing. internal improvements. There you go. Number 4, patriotism, sectionalism. C.
C?
No, you're right. S-E-C-T-I-O-N-A-S. And push it on top. Thank you.